Keel, what do you say we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, hit it.
All right, awesome. So first off, thank you everyone for joining us today. I know it's a national holiday for most folks, a very serious theme honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. Partly because of that, it's really an honor to have this discussion today where we talk about really the essence of the meaning of never again, and efforts by incredible leaders across generations, across identity groups to work towards a world in which never again is a reality for all people in our world. So welcome. My name is David Estrin. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization and emerging movement called Together We Remember. Our mission is to empower the next generation of leaders to make never again a reality, a world without genocide, mass atrocities, and other forms of identity-based violence, including forms of gun violence. And every year in the month of April, which is Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, we organize Remembrance Vigils in high schools, universities, faith communities, you name it, to commemorate the victims of different atrocities throughout history, but also to celebrate the stories of upstanders, people who had the courage to save others' lives. And in those vigils, we bring together people across identity groups to build bridges and to do the hard work that's necessary at the local level on and so that's a brief introduction about Together We Remember. But as far as this conversation series, this is the first in a series of monthly conversations that we're going to be hosting globally to amplify the stories of changemakers who are working to make never again a reality in different ways. And also our effort to really train and prepare the community ambassadors that we work with across the world to organize remembrance vigils in the month of April. And so it's an honor to have both Lizzie Eaton, a student at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, as well as Ivy Schamis, a teacher at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, with us.
We're happy to be here.
Yeah, Ivy has been a social studies teacher at Marjory Stoneman Douglas for about 18 years, I think. She's an award-winning teacher. She's been teaching Holocaust history and other subjects at Marjory Stoneman Douglas in a cutting-edge way for years. Lizzie, I believe you're a senior at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I won't speak too much about them because they can speak wonderfully about their own backgrounds and stories. But before we do that, I just want to pass it over to Keel to share a bit more about the format of the conversation and to kick things off.
Yep, my name is Keel Majewski. Thanks everyone for joining us. So here's how the call is going to work. We've got a list of questions we really want to ask Ivy and Lizzie. I think those will take us through the first 30 minutes of the call, or 35 minutes or so, and then we'll have 10 minutes toward the end for your questions. So if you have a question, do type it into the chat box. If you look at your bottom toolbar and click chat, there will be a little box that pops off to the side, and as questions come up, you can type those, and then we'll do our best to incorporate them at the end of the call. So now turning to our guests, Ivy Schamis and Lizzie Eaton, bring us up to where you are now in your lives. Can you each take a few minutes and tell us about your lives before, during, and after February 14th, 2018? And you can incorporate as much or as little about that day as you want, but help us understand how you got to now. So let's go to Ivy first and then Lizzie.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Like David said, I was teaching at Stoneman Douglas. That was my 17th year teaching at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I was teaching social studies for 5 years. The past 5 years, I've been teaching a history of the Holocaust class. And it was really innovative because even though Holocaust studies is mandated in our state, you can just teach. You can teach a couple days of it in a world history class. But we've been doing a year-long course. The one semester is history of the Holocaust, and the other semester is literature, and then we swap. And I was doing the history portion of that class. And it's awesome, and it's really very interesting, and more students have signed up for it over the years. We now have 240 students, 8 full classes of it this year, which is pretty remarkable. So just briefly, otherwise I could take the entire 40 minutes of the webinar. We were working, it was Valentine's Day, and it was a beautiful day, and all of the students were in a great mood because they were getting candy and gifts, and they're bringing their teachers things. And we were finishing a project that we did the last class that we met. They're 90-minute classes, and so they're block schedules. So we had met every other day, and they were doing a project. They were doing a group project on hate groups that would be on their college campuses. And they were finishing up explaining how they were going to combat hate, which is crazy to begin with. And we started a lesson on the 1936 Olympics in Berlin because the Pyeongchang Olympics were going on, 2018 Pyeongchang Olympics. And so we were using our Cortex. The kids had laptops on their desks, and they were watching testimony on the Eyewitness program from the Shoah Foundation on athletes that were Jewish and not allowed to participate in the Olympics. And towards the end of class, I put a paper up on the doc cam. It's like a big camera and a giant board like those CNN boards in front of the class. And I was asking the kids who knew different people story. 36 Olympics. And Nick Dworet, who was a student in the class who had just earned a swimming scholarship to the University of Indianapolis, was answering some of the questions because he knew Adi Dassler, and Adi Dassler is the shoemaker who made Jesse Owens shoes, and he's German, and he wasn't really supposed to make Jesse Owens track shoes in the Olympics. And he said, I know Adi Dassler, and we were all very impressed that he knew that he was the Adidas founder. And at that moment, we heard very loud shots from, which now we know was an AR-15, but blasting out in the hallway outside our classroom door. We had seconds, really seconds of warning, and the kids flew out of their chairs and tried to hide. And it was really a few seconds later that the gunman was blasting that AR-15 right into our classroom and going back and forth and whatever moving target he could hit. And he ended up ultimately injuring 4 students, and he killed Nicholas Dworet. And he also killed a beautiful girl named Helena Ramsey, who in the beginning of the year when they were talking about if they thought hate could be eradicated, and most students said no, she was one young lady who thought hate could one day be eradicated. So she was a remarkable, I had her as a 9th grader, I had her as an 11th grader. She traveled with me to Europe when I sponsored a trip, but 12 girls came with me, so I knew her quite well. And so come to find out, 17 beautiful, really amazing people from our school were killed that day. And the year has been a whirlwind. It really has. This morning, I was just helping volunteers with memorial panels for each one. And I really think that the students have been quite healing effect upon each other, and all of the community service work that we've been doing helps. So in a nutshell, and I don't want to take the whole webinar, but that's really what happened to us. So right now the classroom is the entire building is a crime scene, and all of the materials that we've had that I taught with for 17 years are still trapped in that classroom. And that's what's happening now.
Yeah. Well, Ivy, thanks so much for sharing that story, and thanks for bringing Nicholas and Helena into the conversation to remember them. Yeah.
Yep. I include them on every time.
Yeah. Lizzie, I want to give you a chance to share too.
Yeah. So, well, just dating back to before the 14th, I was never really politically active. I didn't think I'd be able to have a say in politics and like make a difference. And then I'll go to the 14th now. So I was really sick on the day of the 14th. Like I had a really bad cold and I didn't want to come to school, but I decided to anyways. And it was like a pretty good day. It was relaxing. It was Valentine's Day, of course. So it was a good day in general. And second period came and we had a fire alarm earlier that day, and which was normal. And then we got to fourth period. I was taking a math test, so I was super focused. I wasn't really thinking about anything else. And then the fire alarm went off again, and we thought that was really unusual. Maybe it was culinary, maybe someone pulled it on accident. We didn't really know. So we walked back outside. I was walking with luckily I had a few friends in that class who were walking down the stairs towards the building, and then we hear shots, like 5 or 6 of them, and then we like thought it was like someone banging on the walls or something. We didn't really know. And then we started walking back, and then we hear kids screaming, like teachers yelling at us to come back in the classroom. And then we were in the classroom for about almost 3 hours, and like we had no idea what was going on because we had no service. I had someone telling me there were multiple shooters. There was one, he was gone, he wasn't gone. At this point, my dad was at the school already, and like he was telling me that everything was okay, and I was like, no, like people are telling me 10 million things. And we finally got out of there. And well, before then we heard banging for like an hour. It was like SWAT trying to get everyone out. And then we finally got out and they made us put our hands up, and I had to walk almost a mile to get away from the school. And my dad couldn't reach me because there was too much traffic everywhere, because there's almost 4,000 people at the school. It was crazy. So I made it back to my friend's house, and I left her house around 6, and it usually takes 5 minutes to get home. And it took me about an hour and a half to get home. And then from there, it was just like a blur. The only thing I can remember really is watching the Olympics and like just wanting to like go to bed, because that's really all I could remember. And now I'm like, it's weird that it's been almost a year. Like I still don't think it's been a year. It feels like it's been at least a month. But I'm really happy to be here and to be able to tell my story and to be able to make change in our country when I never thought that'd be possible in the past. So yeah, that's my story.
Wow. Well, thank you, Lizzie. We're so appreciative of you taking time to share that with us and to revisit those wounds. And we wish you all the best in your healing journey and your activism. So, David, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, definitely. So this question's for you, Ivy. So as you know, all 4 of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and in very different ways. And the phrase "never again" has been a really important part of my upbringing, and it's really important part of a lot of the work that we do in the field of Holocaust education and in genocide prevention. And so I was wondering if you could speak a bit to perhaps if you see any connection to, or whether there might be a connection between the phrase "never again" and how students gravitated towards that at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and if you use that phrase in your classroom and how.
Interestingly enough, I don't think that #NeverAgain was an accidental phrase that they hung on to. Many of the March for Our Lives and the activist students were came through the Holocaust class. And like I said, we've had now, I guess it's in the thousands of students, because it's been 5 years and there's so many classes of it. In the back of the classroom was a giant banner, a big giant banner with "We will never forget." We talked about never again, and the whole classroom was decorated, and it sounds morbid, but it actually really wasn't. It was a little uplifting, because we talked about hopeful things in the future. But yes, that whole "never again," the other slogan from Holocaust survivors, which now we use, is "pain should not be wasted." And that's very meaningful, because all the pain that these Holocaust survivors went through, they kept it inside all of those years. And I know that it was extremely painful. They are truly the survivors. But if you don't share that pain, then it's wasted pain that we won't know. And so that's sort of that whole slogan, the "never again." I think those activists took the slogan because, in fact, some of the students had said, we know from the Holocaust class that this "never again" movement is what we want to focus on. But that pain should not be wasted. We need to tell our stories in the hopes that others will learn from our stories. And now, since I don't have all of those posters that I had in my classroom in 12-14, I have a big poster with Elie Wiesel that said, "Once you hear a witness, you become a witness." So now you have to tell the story.
It's incredibly powerful.
And Ivy, I know you and I had talked about the documentary about Eva Kor, who has been popular with her students. I just wanted to let you know there are 2 documentaries about her now, and so I've got this one here ready to send from my friend Ted Green. Yeah,
fabulous. It's people like her that help us heal. Believe it or not, these Holocaust survivors are unbelievable. When we talk about resiliency, this is what we're looking at. And so they had no support and no therapy and no service dogs. They had 0. So when we look at people like Eva Kor, to me, those are the true inspirational people for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Just so folks on the call know, Eva Kor was a lady that I worked with for 10 years when I was at Candles Holocaust Museum in Terre, Haute, Indiana. So Lizzie, next question. I wanted to know if you had thoughts, and by the way, we've kind of picked each of these questions for you and Ivy, one or the other, but both of you are free to give your thoughts on any question. But for Lizzie, I was wondering, we've seen so many terrible instances of atrocities at schools in the US in the last several years. And so I was wondering your thoughts on why this March for Our Lives movement was born out of the tragedy at MSD in particular. Why of all places did March for Our Lives come from that instance?
Well, I think we really took a lot from it was because we learn this every day in our classes, in our Holocaust classes, government classes, really any class. And we learn to rise from hate and to not let it stop us. And we never thought it would happen to us, especially in a town like Parkland. And it's really sad to say that, but it can happen anywhere now. And we wanted to make sure that pain and that like tragedy won't be spread anywhere else. And that's why we were so motivated to have the March for Our Lives and really grow it throughout the country and throughout the world. And the actual march on March 24th of last year, that was just the first step in a lot of change in our country. And I know it's not going to stop. It's going to keep going and keep spreading.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I knew this community. I mean, I would have never guessed that would have happened, but I would have told you that if any community would have started a movement like that, I would have told you Parkland. I raised my children and lived in Parkland for 23 years. And I always thought, this is just an amazing place. I can't believe the world doesn't know about it. Now the world knows about it, but not for a good reason, actually. But it's really, I'm not surprised at the amount of community activism that has come out of this from Parkland and Coral Springs, the surrounding areas of our school.
Mm-hmm. What's so special to see is, together remember, we say, together we remember humanity at its worst to inspire humanity to be its best. And it's in our darkest moments that the brightest beacons of humanity always shine through. And we saw that, at Marjory Stoneman Douglas with some of the members of faculty who saved students' lives. We see that in the reaction to everything that has happened and how students have responded. So, while it was certainly a tragedy, there's so much incredible work that is being done that now becomes a light to all other communities to model thereafter. So it's really special to see that. It's incredibly inspiring. And speaking of sort of remembrance and inspiration, this is a question for both of you, but perhaps Ivy, you might take it first. How would you like to see your friends, your students, your colleagues remembered, and how would you like to see them honored?
The victims that have passed away?
Yeah, like how might we commemorate? How might we really honor their legacy through our actions moving forward?
Okay, well, including them and together we remember is one first step. So that would be awesome. And we are not letting go of anything every day. And it's grown, of course, the memorials and the memories of them. We remember them by continuing the work that they started. We had some fabulous adults. Also, I know we think about the students that were killed, but and all of these, I feel like each had these special souls that they were doing something with their lives, and they were going to make something out of their life. We continue their work. We've been doing these projects. Hands on Broward, I've been doing different projects for each one called Parkland Hearts, because Nick was a swimmer. We just did a beach cleanup, and Helena loved cats. We went to abandoned pet rescue, and there's 17 projects, and we're going to continue to do them every year. So I think the world's not going to forget what we're doing, and if we keep their memory alive through things like Together We Remember, we can continue to do our physical part of what we're doing in the community as well. So thank you for including them, because they really deserve to be remembered.
Really quickly about that. So last year we organized a Together We Remember vigil in Boca Raton, my hometown. And as part of that vigil, we did read the names of the 17 folks who passed away. And we also made these really incredible posters with an organization called I Am Your Protector. We made these posters that commemorated the faculty members who saved lives of other students by closing the doors, blocking the ways.
Right.
And that was really special. People really gravitated to that. And that's something that we're always going to incorporate. At all of our vigils, we welcome our participants to read the names of those who perished at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, but in other communities as well.
Fabulous. Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Lizzie, do you have any thoughts about, how you would like to see your friends and colleagues remembered and honored moving forward?
I mean, I agree with everything she said, that we just need to honor them with action and change, and to keep their memories alive, no matter how big or small that may be, with little visuals or going to your state capitol and talking to whoever you want and trying to make change in any small way, I think is super important. So I agree with everything she said.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so moving from remembrance to action then, question for both of you. And Lizzie, we could start with you first if you'd like. How are you now that you've survived this and you're moving forward and honoring your friends and colleagues and peers through action, you find yourselves in the middle of a movement. So how are you sharpening your skills as an activist, and what sorts of training or organizing skill building have you done or are you looking toward?
So I realized throughout this whole journey, like, how to talk to people in a way that's, I'm only talking about my side of the situation, and just, it's important to have discussions and take both sides with whoever you're talking to, someone who agrees with you and someone who doesn't agree with you. So I've learned just how to talk to people appropriately and like really get a discussion going, because if you're just fighting or you're disagreeing about anything, it really doesn't get a lot done. And just to go on social media, I think I found is super important. If I'm not feeling like, doing something big, I can tweet something or tell my friends to, go out there, talk to people. But it's harder when there's not big groups for a lot of people to go out and do stuff. So it's important to find those little things you can do to keep it going and keep the momentum going, especially around this time of the year, since it's almost been a year. I want to find ways to keep it going and keep it going for years, because I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Wow, Lizzie, you're awesome. See, they're listening to students. I really think the students are the ones that should be in the forefront. I'm back in the background in the classroom where I should be, teaching the material, and the more informed students we have, the better of a democracy we will create, of course. So I prefer that I'm in the classroom and the faces of the kids are the ones that are out there doing this work. People are listening to them. And they've had great opportunities. Some of them have had travel opportunities, not vacation travel, but travel opportunities to speak out and organize whatever the cause is. And just like Lizzie said, gun control, when they're talking to people who are pro-NRA, they're not fighting, they're having a conversation, and this is what I'm so proud of.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to talk about this stuff without like people like Ms. Schamis, because she taught me to fight hate. And we learned about this the whole first semester, like even just learning about the Holocaust like made me realize how important it is to stand up to hate. Like we learned about the White Rose and how the kids who lived in Germany fought against Hitler, and that it's so important that no matter what background you're from, you can still fight for what you believe in, even if it's wrong to some people. It's the right thing to do. So it's really been great, like having the teachers help us through this whole thing and like giving us a lot of great motivation and advice. So that's a big part of it as well.
Aww.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Amazing. And so Lizzie, Ivy mentioned this too, that we want to keep students in the forefront here. So what can we do? We just generally speaking, people on this call and people who want to support you, what can we do to support young people to get more informed and civically engaged?
I would just say do a lot of research. Like I said before, I didn't really know about a lot of this stuff before the tragedy at my school, but just doing research and talking to people. And if you don't feel comfortable saying something, maybe like don't say it at first. Try to understand what you're talking about. Do research. Go, like I said before, go on social media. Do anything you can to help. You don't have to be political all the time. Just encourage your friends and family to go out there and make their voices heard, because a lot of people don't think that their voices will be heard, but you never know until you try. I mean, we're 16, 17 years old, and we had this whole march and encouraged over like 1 million people to be a part of this movement. So I would just say, like, never give up on what you're doing. And when the time comes, it's very important to vote and vote in every election you can, and just to get the word out as much as you can.
Awesome. So a similar question for you, Ivy, but from the perspective of an educator, how might we support teachers to enable those constructive conversations to happen in the classroom? And right now, it's such a polarized, divided time, and we hear often from students and from teachers that it's really hard and they don't feel supported well enough to have those conversations. So I guess the question is, how do you approach those conversations with your students? What materials do you use, and what organizations do you look to for support to facilitate those conversations around addressing hate on difficult subjects? I know you're affiliated with some awesome organizations.
I am, but I'm lucky because I'm lucky because I get to do this. I mean, if you're teaching subjects, especially that have to do with end of the year exams, or you've got to get through massive amounts of material. You don't have time sometimes for these discussions. So I feel like it's up to teachers like me and creative writing teachers and teachers that have these electives that you're able to discuss international relations. We're lucky to be able to have those classes. Truly, the main avenue of getting all of this, of understanding everything, is listening. I know as a teacher, you think you're always talking, but truthfully, it's listening to what the students have to say. Everyone's opinions count. I might have my own political opinion, but I don't think the students really know my political opinion or whatever, because I want to know what you have to say, and everyone counts. Everyone matters. I know that's a cliche, but it's totally true. And if you listen to students, they have a lot to tell you. They have a lot to say. So yes, organizations like yours, Together We Remember, there's so many things out there. The Anti-Defamation League, and there's Echoes and Reflections, and there's local community organizations, and there's so much support out there. And interestingly enough, like Lizzie said, I know that older people fight this whole social media thing, and it could be used to channel negativity for sure, but it's an awesome way to get the word out. So there's a lot of support out there, and you just have to look for it, but it's there, and people are interested. It's almost like a renewed interest in all of this now. So I'm lucky in that I get to do this in my class, but the key is listening to what the students have to say more than talking.
That's great. That's great to hear. It's great to ask the question, but it's wonderful to have an educator kind of reframe it and kind of tell us what really matters here. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on the line. So here's another question for both of you guys, and Lizzie, maybe you can go first to switch things up. We do emphasize not just talking about sort of the tragedy or the sad aspects that we've experienced, but also the positive. And so I'm wondering if you might share in the last 10 months, what might have been one of the most proud moments for you. I know each of you have had some incredible experiences and opportunities, and so I'm curious if you might share one or two of those highlights with us from the past 10 months.
Yeah, so a few days after the shooting, I was having a really hard time talking and expressing my feelings. I didn't even talk to my parents, who I talked to about everything. And when I was little, I used to love writing poems. Whenever we had an English assignment about poems, I was always on top of it. And so I was up really late. I couldn't fall asleep one night a few days after, and I wrote a poem. And that's when I kind of found my voice again, and I really felt like I could express myself and talk to my friends and family again. And that's when I got invited to go on the trip to Tallahassee. And from there, I felt really comfortable talking to our representatives and telling my story. And the highest point for me was talking on the steps of the Capitol in Tallahassee in front of 10,000 people and reading my poem and having my voice heard, because I thought that would never happen again after what happened at our school. So I think that was my proudest moment, and it's still the coolest thing I've ever done, because I felt good about myself after, and that's what's made me feel comfortable talking in front of people and telling my story, and knowing that it's okay to be upset and have these feelings, because you don't think it's going to happen to you and you don't have time to prepare. So being able to have an outlet for it really helped me. And I still use it all the time to help me, just relax or even help my friends. So it's really been awesome.
Yeah.
Aww.
Great. I know there's a lot of folks here who are probably feeling inspired, maybe have something to say. And just a reminder, you can type your question into the chat box at the right, and we'll get to those in just a second. But wanted to ask before this gets away from me, when people want to help, they want to get more involved, where do you send them for, like the next step for more information about March for Our Lives?
I guess to their website and of course social media, because I know they post a lot on there, but there's a lot of websites like for adults or whatever, like Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action. I don't know. Do you have any other, Ms. Schamis? I don't really know.
We've had some really interesting opportunities. We've had students come visit us from New Zealand, actually, that started a movement in New Zealand helping people with the earthquake. I think March for Our Lives is actually, their website is a good place to start. Change the Ref is another one. Change the Ref. And I know I'm more involved in what's happening locally. So I know we're talking to people from all over. So there's a lot of local organizations here, like Hands on Broward. But even people would start out in their local community looking for political activism, if that's what they're interested, or help, or some kind of change in the community. The Brady campaign has been pretty awesome as well, if you're looking to do something with gun control. So the Brady campaign out there has been really pretty remarkable and supportive for us as well.
Yeah, and maybe if you want to start a club at your school, you can go on these websites like March for Our Lives and like the Brady Foundation and the Giffords Foundation, and TogetherWeRemember.org. Yeah, Together We Remember, and start those conversations in the schools and create those clubs, no matter how big or small. And those are the little steps you can get to make those changes.
Great, thanks so much. David, I know we've got a couple good questions here, but did you want to ask any final questions before we shift to our audience?
The final question I just wanted to make sure Ivy had a chance to answer too was, what was one of her proudest moments in the past 10 months? And then we can shift over to
Okay, I'll be super quick, but there's many. I've had a tons of proud moments. I'm proud of every student at Stoneman Douglas. I'm proud of the community. I'm so proud of so many different things. I really could tell you a million things, but there's something that really sticks out in my head. And we had a couple months ago, Armin Kraus, a 90-year-old Holocaust survivor, came to speak to our students. He was fantastic. And the kids all wrote letters to him. I put it in a binder to give it to him for his 90th birthday, And I was reading through the letters and crying. And there was one letter in particular, a kid that was very, very quiet, who never really speaks out. His brother was killed in the shooting at our school. And as I was reading his letter to Armin, he wrote, "I'm so sad about you losing your family." And he went on to write about the loss of his brother. And I just thought this gave him an outlet to talk about it. I was very proud of this student, as I am all of them, but that moment sticks out in my head. The kid who didn't want to ever talk about it or write about it wrote a letter to a Holocaust survivor about it.
That's so special to hear. And, when I posed that question, I wasn't sure, if you were going to talk about one of the incredible moments where you got to meet some incredible people.
No, it's not, because it's not about me.
I mean, and it's beautiful that it's one of those small moments in between. And it's a moment that, for me, makes clear the need to connect, educating about things like the Holocaust and other genocides and other atrocities, because it creates opportunities for those who've experienced the worst of humanity and allows them to heal. It also allows us to advocate and to move forward at the local level and on up. So
Right.
That's a beautiful example of that, and I'm so glad that you.
No, it's definitely not about me. It's about everybody else.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so a couple of questions here. This one is from Shannon at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education for Ivy. When you were talking about your resources and your syllabus, I know there's a lot of Holocaust educators among
Yes.
us. Would you be willing to share your syllabus and list of materials with the group? Oh, sorry, can you?
It might be breaking out.
Yes. Oh, sure. I can definitely give resources, echoes and reflections, and facing history. Absolutely. No problem.
But your syllabus in particular, would you be willing to share?
Sure.
Great. I think Keel's breaking up slightly, so I'll pick up in the question thread. We had some feedback from Peggy Grabowski just saying that she agrees with you. She feels blessed to engage with students in her Holocaust literature about social justice issues, but also affirming or validating that, in her regular English classes, because of curriculum constraints, there are some challenges. So that's something that as an organization, Together Remember, can start to address from an advocacy perspective to ensure that educators have the time and space to do this sort of work.
Right.
So Peggy, thank you for that feedback. We also heard from Kim Klett. She says that we know that gun laws need to change, yet how can we go back further with the issue and deal with kids who have mental illnesses which might drive them to do something like this? What are your opinions for prevention and what you think needs to happen? That goes for both of you guys, whoever feels like sharing.
I'll just say really quick, we're being reactive. Now we have a wellness center and things that we didn't have before. So go ahead, Lizzie, you can do it from a student point of view, but we are now doing more than we ever did because of this tragedy, but we should have had preventative measures in place.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of resources out there that could be allocated to mental health and guidance counselors in the school. Like at our school, we have so many kids that the guidance counselor's only job is to keep track of grades and make sure that we're all on track with it, which is great, but there's no one there to really help us if we have issues. I mean, personally for me, I never had to do that, or I could go see a therapist or whatever. And I know a lot of my friends are like that too, but there are people out there who don't have the resources and are looking for people out there, and especially in our schools, to be able to talk to. And I think that's a problem because they're not being directed to the right places, or they don't have that opportunity. So I think that just goes back to the resources that are unavailable. And I think it's a lot about the resources, but also their exposure to these weapons. And I don't know, it's just it's a weird thing because everyone's situation is different. So there's different ways to deal with it as well.
Yeah, I would also like to note that, we had students on from Montana, and it's, a state that has a lot of, the Second Amendment is really important there. And it's really beautiful that we could have a conversation today where students had exposure to folks in Parkland on the other side of the country, and we can begin to have that dialogue. And I think it was so important that each of you really emphasized the need to have dialogue, and that there are sides, and, it's just, there's a way to have that conversation. And so often people get put into black and white boxes without understanding there's so much gray. And at least Together We Remember's role is to exist in the gray and to create these opportunities, because that's where the good stuff happens. So so that's really nice to
are they still on?
I don't know if they're still on. I saw their video feed earlier, but they might have hopped off. They might have had to end their class.
They were having kind of a poor connection, like me apparently, but we'll share. We're recording the call, so we'll be able to share that back with them.
Okay, sure. Just so they know. I mean, it's many factors. It's mental health. It's guns, but I'm sure everyone can agree that people that are under a mental health watch should not be able to buy an AR-15. So it's not like we're taking their guns away, and it's not, the conversation is, should someone like that have access to guns?
Yeah.
Right. And Rob is a good friend of mine. He's their teacher. He teaches a Holocaust and genocide class that has a waiting list every semester.
Wow.
He takes students to Auschwitz every year. So he's really, he's one of those teachers like you, Ivy, who's really the right person to be facilitating this very polarized conversation.
Excellent.
So with the last few minutes left, unless I see any other new questions come through, I know we've got amazing folks on the line, so I'm sure there's no shortage of questions. So if anyone does have a question that they'd like to type in and share, by all means, go ahead and do so. But at this point, I'll transition with our last few minutes to some concluding thoughts and reminders and some thank yous. So first off, folks have heard Together Remember mentioned a bunch of times on this call and how it might be helpful, which is incredibly kind of both Ivy and Lizzie and others. So number one, just a reminder that we are hosting our global campaign in the month of April. And so this is the perfect time to sign up on our website, togetherweremember.org, to organize a vigil in your community. It could be within your school. It could be small. It could be huge. That's what we're here to support, to help you dream up how you might make that vigil happen. I'm so excited to share that Ivy's going to be working with us on a program Instagram at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, which it hasn't taken shape yet, but we will start that conversation very soon, which is awesome. There's a reminder that about a month from now, remember this is a monthly conversation series. So next month we'll be speaking to Susan Bro, who's an incredible educator and activist, and also the mother of Heather Heyer, who was killed in Charlottesville. And so she'll offer some incredible perspective as well. We also worked with her on a vigil, Together We Remember vigil in Charlottesville with city leaders that frankly almost no one knows happened, because we had to do that event behind closed doors for security reasons, and also just because some of this work is important to do not necessarily out in the public. Some of the hardest conversations can't happen on Twitter. And so that's the sort of work we were doing in Charlottesville. So if you're interested in that, definitely join us. That will be on President's Day. And before I do our final questions, I know we have a question from Caitlin, which I will read out now. What would you say to teens and young adults working on local action? Our local community hasn't been as responsive as we'd like. Any tips on progression? So that's both for you and for Lizzie and Ivy. Any thoughts?
Well, I think it's really important to not let anything stop you from what you're doing, because I think that's really awesome. And even if nothing has happened to you, like I told a lot of people I talked to, like nothing's ever happened at your school, which is great, but to not let that get in the way. You want to make change before anything happens to you. And I think that's important to spread to everyone around you that, yeah, this might not have affected me directly, but we don't want it to in the future. So to be able to spread that message to people who might not agree with you, and to say that we just, we want to feel safe and we want to keep doing this. And if someone does disagree with you, just be like, okay, that's good. Like we can talk about it, or just keep doing what you're doing, but make sure it's always, peaceful, which I'm sure you're doing, and that, you're just doing your thing and not letting anyone stop you. I think that's super important.
That's awesome, Lizzie. And also, if the local community is not as receptive, you can branch out. So maybe the immediate community is not as receptive, but you can find a surrounding community, or you can find something like the kids did on a state level. And there's so many organizations out there you can align yourself with, whatever it is that's important to you: school safety, gun control, mental health, whatever the Holocaust education, whatever your topic is, or whatever makes you feel like you want to become a part of. It could be outside of just the local community if you want to be part of something bigger.
Cantrell, our friend there in Terre Haute, she started a group called Terre Haute Teens for Action, and they're an amazing activist. And so I know they'll persist in, one way or another. Just I heard from somebody in this work that when your heart gets tired, just keep your legs moving, kind of.
It's not a quick thing. It takes a lot of time. We know that things take time. Laws don't change overnight. It's perseverance. And I go back all the time to Holocaust survivors. If no one had perseverance, things would not have happened the way they did. And so I feel like every time we feel like maybe we feel a little deflated, I look at those survivors and I think they are the ones that we need to get our ideas from.
That reminds me, since this is MLK Day, that exactly reminded me of an example, a historical example where something didn't exactly work originally, but then it had a profound impact later. And that example is the Montgomery bus boycott. Was inspired by streetcar boycotts in the South 50 years earlier. And those streetcar boycotts did not lead to the kind of change that those activists thought would happen, but it served as the inspiration for what became the Montgomery bus boycott almost 50 years later. So, the work that you're doing now definitely does have an impact, and there will be activists and those who follow your footsteps. Maybe it's sooner, it might be later, but what's most important is that we keep showing up for this work. And that's why for Together We Remember, we organize these vigils every single year as a forcing function, as a way to keep going. And we don't know exactly how far we'll get in a specific year, but hopefully we'll make some leaps and bounds this time this time around. So with all of that said, I just want to share an incredibly huge thank you for folks who joined us on this national holiday. A quick sort of meditation and shout out and thank you to the legacy of Dr. King. A huge thank you to Ivy and to Lizzie, to Keel, and to everyone who joined today. For anyone who wants to reach out, feel free to find us at our website, togetherweremember.org, and look forward to hopefully seeing you on the next call that we do on the 18th of February with Susan Bro. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I have one quote from MLK, and it is, "The time is always right to do what's right."
I don't see a better way to end. Thank you so much, Ivy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.